the concerned minister. So this is not good. This is...
The chair, we do not believe chair has been fair in the conduct in allowing her to make this point 5 times.
Please now listen to me. मैंने आपकी पूरी बात सुनी है.
This bill makes sure that both, if to use your phrase, my phrase is not veto.
मैं सोचता था कि चोर रात को आते हैं, खिड़की के अंदर से कूद कर आते हैं, मगर मुझे पता लगा कि सबसे बड़े चोर खुले दिन में आते हैं, सबके सामने आते हैं और सूट पहन कर आते हैं.
यदि कोई प्रश्न सदन में यदि उठाया जाता है, यदि मंत्री उस पर एक बार के बजाय 2 बार भी उसकी यदि जानकारी दे देता है तो इस पर उसे आपत्ति क्यों होनी चाहिए? यह बात हमारी समझ के परे है या नहीं समझ गया?
Those in favor में से aye.
Those against please say no.
I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Amendment is adopted.
वर्तमान सत्र के दौरान 25 सरकारी विधेयक पुनर्स्थापित किए गए, कुल 24 विधेयक पारित किए गए. माननीय सदस्यगण, आप सभी का सहयोग के लिए फिर एक बार धन्यवाद. Now House stands adjourned. Senator.
बिल पारित करने का श्रेय लेने की मंशा से उसको जल्दी जल्दी पारित करा दिया गया.
ब्लैक मनी के इश्यू में हमने पहले से भी कोशिश करते हैं और यही जनता को हम बताएं भाई हमारी कोशिश चल रही है. हमारे कोशिश के बावजूद भी चंद चीजें जो जनता चाहती है या लोग चाहते हैं वो नहीं हो रहा है.
So there you have it. After many disruptions, the extended budget session of Parliament is now over. 25 bills have become acts over the last 30 days of sittings, but the government has had to accept defeat when it comes to the GST Constitutional Amendment Bill and, of course, the Land Bill. I'm Kritika Saxena. You're watching India Business Hour. I have with me Surabhi. Surabhi, have you been hoping that you were in Delhi and not in Bombay?
No, not at all. I'm quite happy to be in Bombay, I must say. But, you know, yeah, that whole point about losing out over the GST bill, the FM made comments just a while back claiming it wasn't really a loss and that they're hoping to move very quickly. We will talk about that. That's one of our big stories. So, Kritika, not entirely completely unproductive session, because just today we've seen lots of action on the amendments to the Benami Transactions Act. We've also seen amendments to the Companies Act. So, a fair amount of work actually moving forward. Of course, the jury's still out on how effective it's been.
Absolutely. In fact, let's quickly now take a look at all the other action that we have been tracking for you all day long.
Have to work extremely hard to cover up for this timeline so that the 1st April 2016 deadline is not lost.
Finance Minister slams the opposition for disruptive practices on goods and services tax, says he's worried about the government's ability of meeting the April 2016 rollout timeline, hopes that the bill will clear both houses in the monsoon session.
But 13-14 was 16,000 crores, which on aggregate terms works out to around 2.5% of group turnover.
Tata Sons is set to chalk up a 60,000 crore rupee capex plan for FY16, says its focus on innovation will bring in over $1 billion in financial benefits. That's a CNBC TV 18 exclusive.
The Sahara Group may soon lose its mock Grosvenor House property in London. The administrator appointed by the Bank of China expects to conclude auctioning off the property by the 23rd of May. That's another exclusive.
We have concluded the reverse e-auction.
The government's efforts to revive stranded power projects through auction of pooled gas pay off. NTPC, GSEC, Torrent Power and CLP win the auctions of domestic gas.
And Ratnagiri Gas and Power wins big at the e-auction of pooled gas. Apart from increasing power capacity to 500 megawatts, the company will be able to reduce its 8,500 crore rupee debt burden substantially. Yet another exclusive.
The government looks to open the Indian e-commerce sector to more foreign direct investment. Commerce Ministry to meet with e-tailers and other stakeholders tomorrow to discuss FDI in B2C e-commerce.
बहुत दिनों से इंतजार कर रहा था चीन यात्रा.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi is all set to begin his 3-day visit to China to woo investors. Expects to sign bilateral agreements worth over $10 billion after meeting with President Xi Jinping, Prime Minister Li Qiupang and captains of Chinese industry.
CBI trains its guns on GMR's Delhi International Airport in its crosshairs, files a preliminary inquiry to look into allegations of irregularities in the leasing of land for the airport by the UPA government.
And on the hour today, a look at how India's telecom landscape got a makeover under Rahul Kullar's 3-year stint as the chairman of TRAI.
One of the top 3 issues trending people concerned, that's the corruption of the public officials.
In our special series, Engaging the Dragon, Renmin University of China's law professor He Jiahong says corruption is a common enemy for both India and China.
And dairy giant Amul looks to expand its horizon, draws up plans to begin selling camel milk by July this year. Yet another exclusive.
All right, we will get to that interesting story on Amul in just a bit, but first let's take you through the day's market action. Volatility continued to harry traders, but the bulls managed to keep their head above water and benchmark indices ended the day on a strong note. The Nifty reclaimed 8,200. The Sensex closed over 1% higher as well. The mid-cap index reported strong gains, settling up by 1.5%. Now, it wasn't just the stock markets that managed a firm rally despite that volatility. The rupee ended stronger against the American greenback. It even strengthened below 64 per dollar intraday, but then was forced to give up some of those gains. It finally closed around 16 paise stronger at just around the 64 mark.
But Surabhi, it was in the markets or the rupee that we were watching out for over the last couple of days. 30 days over a 2-month period, 25 bills clearing both houses of parliament. Those are the key highlights of the budget session of parliament that's just ended. The government says Lok Sabha lost 6 hours and 54 minutes due to disruptions, but made up for this loss. Rajya Sabha, meanwhile, lost 18 hours and 29 minutes due to disruptions. Meanwhile, Parliamentary Affairs Minister Venkaiah Naidu says that this has been one of the more fruitful sessions in the last 5 years. He defends the statement, saying that the bills that got passed and numerous demands for grants were addressed despite opposition trying to disrupt 32 out of the total 35 sittings. Listen in to what he had to say.
Lok Sabha 117% of the scheduled working hours. Rajya Sabha 101 of the working hours, 101 ये काम पूरा किया है. In terms of number of sittings also, this session scored very high. Lok Sabha had 35 sittings, the highest in the last 5 years. Rajya Sabha held 32 sittings, next only to that of 34 in 2012.
All right, now the finance minister is not entirely happy with the way in which this session has panned out. He slammed the opposition for throwing a spanner in the works when it comes to the goods and services tax and the land bill. Speaking after both houses were adjourned sine die, he said that the government will have to work very hard to meet the April 2016 deadline for the rollout of GST. However, he said that the passage of the anti-black money bill was a landmark moment for India.
The GST law, the Constitution Amendment, really should have been passed in this session of Parliament. The reason being, it has spent almost 2.5 years in the Standing Committee earlier. And having spent 2.5 years in Standing Committee, and amongst the major amendments that we've made to the 2011 law, the principal amendments were those which the Standing Committee has recommended. Over and above the Standing Committee, there was only one recommendation, which is that 1% additional tax up to a maximum of 2 years. And that is something in which a very delicate balance was struck in the empowered committee meeting. So this is not a law which Parliament alone has to enact, because the states also have to approve it. And therefore the balance between a parliamentary wisdom and the consensus of the states has to be maintained at the same time. Now we had maintained that. And for some reason, the principal opposition party, the Congress party, took a view that it needs one more committee. It's surprisingly because A, it was their own bill, B, it's been improved upon by the Standing Committee, C, their own chief ministers are privy to the empowered committee which has approved it. We were able to muster a very large support in the Lok Sabha. Even in the Rajya Sabha, as far as the numbers are concerned, I don't think the Congress party had sufficient numbers to succeed in a motion referring it to the select committee. But then they started resorting to other tactics like not allowing the House to proceed and so on. And therefore we had to make the best of the situation. Now this poses an important challenge before us. And the challenge is that what should have been really cleared in March and April, or May at best, now goes to July. And hoping that it's cleared in July, which I am reasonably certain because of the what has been assured to us, and I'm sure the Standing Select Committee will act with prudence. The next challenge is that we simultaneously have to do two exercises. One is to keep the three other bills in readiness. Now those bills have to be approved, and the only timeline we have for those bills is either the monsoon session and the winter session. This constitution amendment after July will then have to go immediately to the states, because more than 50% of the states has to ratify it. So first we must have the Rajya Sabha approving it in July. Then we must have at least 50% of the states approving it in their monsoon sessions. And then both in the monsoon and the winter session we must have the CGST, the SGST, the IGST, the three laws being cleared. And parallelly the IT backbone to be ready. Now these are the steps which we have to take really to hit the 1st April 2016 deadline. Now these 2 months that we have lost are quite critical. And therefore we'll have to work extremely hard to cover up for these timelines so that the 1st April 2016 deadline is not lost.
So the Finance Minister is clearly hopeful that the other three bills that weren't taken up will be passed either in the monsoon session or the winter session of Parliament. Meanwhile, CNBC TV 18's Rituparna Bhuyan, who has been tracking the entire budget session, joins us now with all the details of the action that took place over the last few days. Rituparna, the government seems happy with the way the session has turned out. What's your assessment? Take us through the detailed hits and misses by the end of it.
Well, while the Parliamentary Affairs Minister talked about how productive this session was, he also alluded to the fact that there were several disruptions or attempted disruptions. However, as far as bills passed by the individual houses are concerned, I have some statistics. Lok Sabha passed 23 bills, while Rajya Sabha on its part passed 24 bills. In addition to that, 22 bills were introduced in the Lok Sabha, while only 2 were introduced in the Rajya Sabha. Now, as you said, 25 bills were passed by both the houses, and these include the insurance, the coal and mines, the Indo-Bangla Pact. In fact, we saw unprecedented camaraderie as far as the Indo-Bangla bill is concerned, with not even one single vote going against this legislation. However, because the numbers are short as far as the Rajya Sabha is concerned, the government had to yield to the opposition's demand of sending some crucial bills to the select panel, which includes the constitutional amendment bill on GST, the land bill, and of course the real estate bill. Now, as far as the monsoon session is concerned, we'll have to keep a lookout for what happens to these 3 key legislations, because the select panels will give their final report in the first week of the monsoon session, and it remains to be seen if there is a consensus regarding passing of these crucial bills in the monsoon session. With that, it's back to you.
Okay, all right, Ritu, thanks so much for that. It's been a busy session and a busy few weeks for Ritu as well. Right, staying with Parliament action, the government's aim to improve the ease of doing business in India has received a fillip. The amendments to the Companies Act have cleared both houses. The Companies Act amendment bill was sent back to the Lok Sabha after being passed in the Rajya Sabha earlier in the day and was pushed through the lower house with just a minute to go before adjournment. Now, CNBC TV 18's Malvika Jain is standing by to take us through the salient amendments that have been cleared today. Malvika, what do these amendments bring to the table?
Well, basically, there are around 24 amendments which have been introduced to the Companies Act, which was passed in December 2013. And the primary reason which the government says compelled it to bring about these amendments was to improve ease of doing business. But what is interesting is that the bill in the first place was converted into an act by consensus of both the BJP and the Congress and other members of Parliament. But even at that time in industry had said that it would be difficult to implement some of these provisions. Primarily, there are 16 key issues which have been addressed by the government by way of an amendment. These relate to related party transactions, the responsibility of auditors in case of fraud and its communication, the stringent provisions pertaining to bail. Now, with these amendments going through both houses of the parliament, the government does feel that the business environment would improve, but of course it remains to be seen how far even the existing act could be implemented practically. There are already indications from the government that a committee would be set up to further amend the Companies Act of 2013.
All right, Malvika, thank you so much for breaking that up for us. Meanwhile, the government's offensive against black money is set to get stronger after the Lok Sabha, the Rajya Sabha approved a black money bill to target illegal wealth abroad. And today, the cabinet approved a new Benami transaction bill to curb black money in India, as promised in the union budget. This bill provides for rigorous punishment against offenders like hefty fines, imprisonment and confiscation of assets. The bill is expected to be tabled in the monsoon session of Parliament, or Surabhi, as the Finance Minister said, possibly in the winter session, if not the monsoon session.
Absolutely. All right, on that note, let's move on to the two big-ticket divestments that have been doing the rounds for quite some time now. The Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs has approved the Divestment Department's proposal to offload 5% stake in NTPC and another 10% stake in Indian Oil Corporation. The government stands to earn over 13,800 crore rupees via the stake sale at current market prices.
That's not all, Surabhi. Coming to the rescue of highway projects that were taken up, the government has permitted developers to exit these road projects by selling their entire equity 2 years after completion of the project. This move is possibly expected to unlock investment worth 4,500 crore rupees. That's just minimum. It could be slightly higher as well. The cabinet also allowed the NHAI to intervene in those projects that are stuck due to financial reasons like lack of additional equity or lenders' inability to disperse any more capital. But the NHAI intervention will be limited to projects that are in an advanced stage of completion. 16 projects are expected to be benefited from the move.
Well, speaking of all the cabinet action, the cabinet today approved a new urea policy that aims to make the country self-sufficient in production in the next 4 years and ensure timely supply of the soil nutrient to farmers. The policy outlines measures for boosting urea production by making plants more energy efficient and pooling of gas-based supplies to urea facilities, among others.
Surabhi, but if you thought today was a busy day, tomorrow will be busier. Is the government about to change its mind and allow FDI and e-commerce? Commerce Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has called a meeting tomorrow with stakeholders to review just that. Industry chambers, CII, FICCI, representatives from associations like NASSCOM as well as the likes of Flipkart and Snapdeal will all be making their case tomorrow in their meeting with Sitharaman. As of now, 100% FDI is allowed only in business-to-business or B2B e-commerce and not in business-to-consumer or the retail segment. As recently as last month, the minister had, in a written reply to the Rajya Sabha, had said that there is no proposal under consideration yet to review the FDI policy for the e-commerce space. And speaking about that story, joining us now to talk about the details and implications, I have with me the president of NASSCOM, R. Chandrasekharan. Sir, I wanted to understand from you, you will be at that meeting tomorrow. Are we expected to see any significant headway in terms of discussions with respect to the foreign direct investment in e-commerce?
In tomorrow's meeting, we would be sharing our perspective on FDI and e-commerce. We had earlier conveyed our view that there was no logical reason to limit FDI in e-commerce in the B2C space, because e-commerce was something which is something which needs to be permitted, which needs to be encouraged to grow in the country. It has many multiplier benefits, and it needs a lot of investment. We have also been receiving inputs from a number of members. There are various views also which exist in some segments of the industry. We are reviewing all of these perspectives like impact and implications for the growth of some of the domestic companies, impact on growth of infrastructure, impact for small businesses which are seeking to connect with markets, impact on the consumers. So all of these angles need to be looked at. So we are taking those into consideration, and we will be sharing our assessment also with the ministry.
So, Mr. Chandrasekhar, if you could give us some sense of that assessment. I know you can't get into too many details right now on the phone line, but just some sense. I mean, in terms of the explosive growth that we've seen e-commerce companies, exhibit over the last couple of months and the last 1 year, and also the kind of capital requirement we might be looking at, and then therefore the need to perhaps allow FDI in B2C e-commerce.
Yes, there are a whole range of e-commerce companies. First of all, quite often when we talk about e-commerce, the mental picture is of only e-tailing. That is, people selling and buying goods through e-commerce. But the term e-commerce actually covers a lot more than just that. It also includes, digital goods which are bought and sold. It also includes physical goods which are bought and sold. So when you download music, when you download movies, when you provide different kinds of services. So it's not only about goods, it's also about services. It's not only about physical goods, it's also about digital goods. All the range of such transactions come under the generic term e-commerce. And many of these also provide services to small businesses. They also provide a range of options and benefits to consumers.
Right.
And the advantage and benefits to all of these segments would need to be looked at. So that is how, when we had made that evaluation and we had looked at all of these options earlier, we had said that, the FDI in e-commerce should be permitted in the B2C space as well. But based on the review and assessment, we will be having some of our members also joining the discussion tomorrow. And, we will be presenting our updated view in the discussion that takes place tomorrow. But the logic that had been put across earlier, that for many of the e-commerce firms, and we are not talking just about, the large 3 or 4 known names in e-commerce. We are talking about all the other categories which I just mentioned.
Sure.
People who are buying and selling digital goods, people who are buying and selling or creating platforms for services.
Yes,
all of those do need FDI.
Sure,
and
sure.
by barring the B2C space, I think their growth is also being limited.
All right, sir. A little short in time today. Thank you so much. We're going to watch out for what comes out of that all-important meeting, and let's see if there are significant breakthroughs tomorrow. Well, moving on, even as the central government is looking to evaluate the option of finally opening up the e-commerce sector, the Delhi government has gone ahead and issued a circular which bans any foreign direct investment in the retail sector, that's traditional retail, in the National Capital Region. Kritika?
Well, Sarbhi, meanwhile, Tata Sons is in the process of finalizing its capex plans for FY16, and the number could possibly exceed 60,000 crore rupees. When I spoke to Mukund Rajan, the brand custodian of Tata Sons, he told me that the firm expected the financial benefits from innovation to surge to over $1.1 billion this year. That's in fact the highest innovation gain that the Tata Group has seen. Take a look.
So the 1.1 billion is really a combination of top-line additions, around 900 million, and a further 200 million odd of savings, which kicks in as well. So the net impact in financial terms, annualized, is 1.1 billion every year. So we are certainly delighted at that number. Last year the number was less than $1 billion for the innovations registered the previous year. So clearly this is a rising trend. And for a $100 billion group, it's not an insignificant number. We're very proud of that number.
You earmarked roughly, if I'm correct, at the beginning of the year when I spoke to you, you had said about 60,000 to 70,000 crore rupees in terms of capital expenditure across the group coming in from Tata Sons. Do you set aside a separate capex for innovation spending across groups as well?
So I think we gave you a number for R&D spending, which for 2013-14, because the numbers for 14-15 are still being collated and the annual accounts will be closed soon, and then we'll have the final numbers for the 14-15 fiscal. But 13-14 was 16,000 crores, which on aggregate terms works out to around 2.5% of group turnover. That's a number we'd actually like to see increase over time. But it compares very favorably with an India average for corporate India of around 0.9%. So it's substantially higher, but we think we could do better. And that's something that we will be focusing on the years ahead.
Okay. Over and above R&D in that case, what is the capex that the group level, that the group has worked on for FY15? And, what is the number that you're looking at for FY16?
I think the numbers that you cited are pretty much the numbers that are still there. For FY16, we will be making some announcements soon.
Okay. Could it be higher than last year's projections?
I think you'll have to wait and see. We've had some projects that have been very large capital investment projects. For instance, Tata Steel, Kalinganagar. A lot of that is beginning to come on stream. So I think you'll have to wait and see the total numbers we divulge.
Okay, that's over $1 billion saved through innovation. That's what Kritika picked up at Tata Sons today. Let's move on to another CNBC TV 18 exclusive. It appears that the Sahara Parivar's prized possession, the Grosvenor House in London, could be slipping away from Subrata Roy's hands. Sources say that with the company in default of an $850 million loan, the administrator appointed by the Bank of China expects to conclude the sale of this property by as early as the 23rd of May. Ashmit Kumar is joining in with the details. Ashmit, one day the Parivar gets good news that the chief might actually be released from jail. The next day there's talk of, this big property slipping away. What are their options?
We're very limited at this point, given that the facts of the case would suggest that they're less than 10 days away from losing ownership as well as control of the Grosvenor House. Now, here's the long story cut short. Essentially, Sahara at this point stands in default of an $850 million loan that was raised from the Bank of China. Subsequently, after the default, BOC moved towards foreclosure, appointed Deloitte as the administrator, which in turn is looking to sell the Grosvenor House. Now, importantly, what we understand is that auctions as we speak are currently underway. The first round of bidding has already concluded. We understand that the second round of bidding is expected to conclude on May 18th, and that JLL, which has been appointed by Deloitte for selling the hotel, is in fact has timed out this entire transaction to close this transaction and to transfer ownership as early as May 23rd. Now, here's a quick look at the implications. For one, throughout the last 18 months, we've seen that Sahara has not been keen on losing control, losing ownership, and this would significantly impact their overseas hotel portfolio. Another important impact would be that should Grosvenor House be wrested away from Sahara, it would have severe implications for the valuations that Sahara could hope to realize from selling its US-based hotels, that's the New York-based hotels, two of them. And thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, the bearing and the implications that losing Grosvenor House could have on the litigation here with SEBI before the Apex Court. Now, as for the options before them, not very many. One option that they can consider is to challenge the auction process before the London High Court, but that will be a tricky proposition given that the London High Court had approved the appointment of the administrator in the first place. The second option that they have is to perhaps present a bona fide offer for sale before Bank of China. So few options, the sum and substance being that should a very brief window for them within which to act. If not, then Grosvenor House could be wrested away from them.
Okay, so Roy has his hands full and Ashmit has been tracking Sahara as Subrata Roy non-stop. We'll keep getting you back with updates on that. But of course, moving on to the aviation space, the CBI has registered a preliminary inquiry against unknown officials of the Ministry of Civil Aviation, the Air Authority of India or AAI, and the Delhi International Airport Limited. Allegations are that certain officials have committed gross misconduct in the matter of lease of 190 acres of government land belonging to AAI at IGIL to dial at nominal price as compared to the prevailing market price. The uncertainties in the aviation space keep continuing clearly. CNBC TV 18's Rituparna Bhuyan meanwhile caught up with the Minister of State for Civil Aviation, Mahesh Sharma, who says that his ministry will not be fair to take action against any person or authority if the allegations are actually proven right. Take a listen.
देखिए, ये मेरे पास सूचना आज ही मुझे भी मिली है. मैं इस विषय में और जांच कर आपके पास वापस आऊंगा और अगर कोई ऐसा कहीं ना कहीं अव्यवस्था हुई है या कोई ऐसी गाइडलाइंस के अगेंस्ट कोई काम हुआ है तो उसे सजा मिलनी चाहिए.
So from what we understand that this all happened during the previous government, is that the correct assessment?
It is true. All these airport, DIAL and GMR, their all activities went under the previous government.
So, and from internal inquiry, will you hold an inquiry and internal inquiry also?
See, if there is any irregularity, no government will like, definitely our government will not at all like, and it will like to bring it to the notice of the public and the parliament, and definitely will take action accordingly.
All right, that's a controversy surrounding the Delhi International Airport. Moving on, Narendra Modi is all set to leave for his three-nation tour later tonight. And while Mongolia and South Korea also feature on the list, all eyes are on his first trip to China as the Prime Minister of India. And even as the two countries try to iron out their differences on border issues, the fact that this trip could only bring the two emerging superpowers closer is not lost on the Prime Minister himself.
मैं बहुत दिनों से इंतजार कर रहा था चीन यात्रा के लिए। सरकार बनने के बाद राष्ट्रपति जी ने मुझे बहुत गर्मजोशी से फोन पर बात की, अभिनंदन किए। बाद में गत एक वर्ष में हम 3 बार मिले। राष्ट्रपति जी के साथ बहुत विस्तार से बातें हुई। मुझे विश्वास है कि चीन की मेरी ये यात्रा भारत और चीन के संबंधों को ही आगे बढ़ाएगी ऐसा नहीं, लेकिन पूरे एशिया को और दुनिया के सभी डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज के लिए एक नया सीमा चिन्ह बनेगा, ऐसा मेरा विश्वास है।
All right, that China trip is going to be a very exciting one, and of course we will get you comprehensive coverage throughout Mr. Modi's stay. On that note, it's a wrap on tonight's edition of India Business Hour. Thank you for watching.